Okay, so here's the thing. There are countless death metal bands out there, and many of the pioneers are still playing live shows, releasing new music, but I think that only so few have maintained the same level of consistency as Cannibal Corpse. And it's very funny because every time that I talk about this, someone will get upset saying,
"Oh my god, there are so many death metal bands out there, so many old school underground death metal bands out there that don't get the necessary recognition yet. You have Cannibal Corpse and da.
And you know what? It might be true. Yet, if you take a close look at those bands, you might realize that they haven't released any new material since 1989, they haven't played live shows since 2 decades ago, and they have gone through so many lineup changes and so many style changes, and basically it's not the same band and none of the original members are playing in the same band, so it's like, what the f. And to be honest, it's like, I'm going to hate myself for bringing this band as an example, but hey, take Death, for example.
Blasphemy!
If you take a close look at Death discography, you'll realize that there are only 4 albums that are actually, only true death metal, or maybe like death metal period. Human being the last of them. And right after that, obviously everything leans way more into the progressive side of things. And don't get me wrong, I absolutely love Individual Thought Patterns, Symbolic, The Sound of Perseverance. Actually, Individual Thought Patterns is one of my favorite albums of all time. And for example, Chuck was absolutely pissed that Symbolic was being marketed as a death metal album. The bottom line is, very few bands have had such a long, unbroken and successful run while evolving with their own sound and still remaining undeniably death metal like Cannibal Corpse. We have ex-members of Tyrant Sin and Beyond Death, and they came together to form this beautiful band that we all love and adore, Cannibal Corpse. And no long after that, their debut album hits the shelves, Eaten Back to Life. This album captures the very raw and primitive essence of Cannibal Corpse. Everything is there, just in a very unpolished way, let's say. For example, if someone that has never heard Cannibal Corpse before, let's say that they start listening to the Wretched Spawn, and then they immediately go back to Eaten Back to Life, they will easily know that this is the same band. Eaten Back to Life feels like an unpolished gem. It's the perfect metaphor for a debut album of a band that would soon be one of the most successful bands in death metal. All of the core elements of their sound are already there, just presented in a more rough and chaotic way. It's almost like grabbing a bite to a very delicious fruit that it's kind of green, it's not fully ripe yet, but it's delicious still. One of the things that will identify this album easily, or one thing that I could put on top of this album, it's definitely the thrash ambience. It's like the very raw death metal Cannibal Corpse-esque sound, yet once again much more primitive, encapsulated in a chaotic, trashy sound, so to speak. Yet the band's sonic identity, or whatever, it's still intact. For example, if tracks like Bloody Chunks, Bury in the Backyard, Mangled were to be recorded today with the current lineup, it would still sound like Cannibal Corpse modern era. Simply put, everything that defines Cannibal Corpse was already inside Eaten Back to Life, just in a raw form. So, Eaten Back to Life was a great album, and before you can say death metal, bam! Butcher at Birth was released. I can only imagine being a metalhead back in 1991, having listened to Eaten Back to Life, having loved that album, and then this guy's released Butcher at Birth. It's like, yeah, hold my f***ing beer while I go and break my neck while listening to this thing. I think that Butchered is where the Cannibal Corpse sound was officially born, so to speak. It's almost as if they consciously grabbed everything that was awesome about Eaten Back to Life and they distilled it and press it to get like this very condensed, evil thing that is butchered at birth. I mean, like, you can literally hear how these guys were like, yeah, you know what, let's raise the bar on this motherfucker. This type of evolution is something that you would normally see on a band maybe in a span of 4 years, 5 years, 3 years, or something like that. Yet these guys managed to do that in 1 year. I mean, you can literally hear how they basically got rid of everything that was not working on Eaten Back to Life while exaggerating everything that made Eaten Back to Life great. And that's a beautiful thing about Cannibal Corpse, that since day one, well, technically day two, they have been constantly improving, evolving, morphing, changing to a more pure, defined, evil, and better sounding band, while still being true to their sound, while still sounding like Cannibal Corpse. Butcher at Birth marks that departure from that trashy, chaotic, and almost melodic sound that you had on Eaten Back to Life. With this album, Cannibal Corpse began to introduce their unique trademark core elements that would define their sound moving forward. On this album you will start to listen a whole lot more of the fast tremolo picking on the guitars. You can hear how Paul is way more tight and precise on the drums, while Chris on the vocals adds like this new low guttural level. Everything just feels way more intentional, technical, violent, and precise. You will also start to hear like a bit of blast bits here and there on this album. And another thing is that you can hear a lot more of those mean dissonant melodies that Cannibal Corpse is so known for. It just sounds diabolical, man. I fully understand parents back then like trying to do whatever they could in order to prevent their kids listening to this stuff. I mean, like, this is pure evil sounding distortion on steroids. A quick way to define Butcher at Birth is a beautiful, malevolent, and crushing evolution. So, I just mentioned that Butcher at Birth was a very intentional, fast-paced evolution from Eaten Back to Life. The same thing happens here. I mean, with this album they took a huge step forward in every sense of the word. Hello blast beats, hello Alex Webster's insane bass lines. Chris, it sounds, I mean, even more guttural, more like growly. The vocals have like this bitey growl to it. I don't know, but it's... And technically speaking, this album also took a huge leap forward. Don't get me wrong, you know that I absolutely love everything related with, you know, old school death metal. Yet, I think that the guitars on Butcher at Birth sound a bit wonky. While here on Tomb of the Mutilated, I think that it's like the beginning of that guitar Cannibal Corpse sound, so to speak. Could it be that on this sound they started using the metal zone as a boost with maybe a crate or an Ampeg or something like that? And it would make sense because the metal zone was just released in 1991. And I think that the guitar sound also played like a big role on the sound shift or sound evolution that Cannibal Corpse would have throughout the next albums. And the production is a beautiful example of how I think, in my humble opinion, death metal should be managed. And it's great because everything is like dry. There's almost, and I believe that there's no reverb on this album whatsoever. The vocals are completely dry, bass is dry, guitars are dry. Maybe there might be some reverb on the drums, not quite sure. But even as dry as it sounds, it's amazing. The production, it's just great. And it also adds to, you know, the realness, I don't know how to call this, but of listening to an actual band and not just to a whole bunch of millions of tracks merged together and piled upon each other just for a cool production trick. I don't know, man, it just sounds, you know, raw, sincere, true, and cool. I mean, this album is just, for me, is a masterpiece. I don't think there's just one weak sounding song or maybe a filler or something like that. Every single song is just a banger. I mean, the fucking album starts with Hammer Smashed Face. If everything would have sucked right after Hammer Smashed Face, this still would have been a solid release. Personally, I think that this is my favorite when it comes to the Cannibal Corpse OG era. Everything is just tighter, more complex, and more technical. Okay, so far we are on a streak here. 3 albums, a super huge, mega healthy evolution on steroids. It's pretty obvious that on every single release they are going to raise the bar just a little bit, and it's kind of their thing by now. It's like these guys are constantly finding a new way to level up. Having that in mind, it seems that they started to hit a bit of a ceiling with one of the members. It seems that founding member Bob Rousey was having a bit of a hard time trying to nail and to, you know, get the parts right. Basically, Jack Owen had to record all of the guitars on Tomb of the Mutilated since Bob apparently was not able to get things as precise as they wanted. And not wanting to be slowed down by any inconvenience whatsoever, they decided to part ways with Bob Rousey. Understandably so, Bob Rousey was so struck by this that he quitted music altogether. So sadly, this album marks the end of the OG Cannibal Corpse era. But anyways, they just went and snatched Malevolent's creation, guitarist Rob Barrett, so that he could fill that void, which is a tactic that they will repeat again and again. So the bleeding solidifies the Cannibal Corpse sound while once again feeling like something is evolving, changing, morphing. You can definitely feel Bob's absence composition-wise on the bleeding, while Tomb of the Mutilated was something more like chaotic, violent, and aggressive. The bleeding, it's a bit more of a groovy, catchy thing. I do think that this album has its fillers and there are songs that are just not as memorable, and you can feel that the album basically like loses intensity right after it begins. Once again, it seems that they leaned a bit more into the catchy hook riffing instead of the more wild, chaotic way of writing, I guess. And don't get me wrong, the album kicks off with absolute classics like Staring Through the Eyes of the Dead, With a Knife, Stripped and Strangled, yet right after that, for me, it kind of loses steam, and the overall intensity just like fades away. And it's like very weird and hard to like review this album, because if you grab the bleeding on its own, for me, honestly, it's like, man, it's a classic, it's a beast of an album. But if you put it right next to Tomb of the Mutilated, man, you can feel the difference, you know? Everything is context. And production-wise, I think that the album sounds more dark. The guitars are, you know, darker, like if they had almost like a high-pass filter. The raw and dry element is not as strong as on Tomb of the Mutilated. And the drums also include like a bit of a change. It seems that they wanted to go with a more of an acoustic feeling and less of a triggered, you know, drum. So the drums, especially the double kick, is not as super triggered and clickety as on Tomb of the Mutilated, which is not bad or good, it's just different. And the guitars, in my opinion, sounds like a bit more loose and boomy in general. And also Chris Barnes' vocals are less strong. They are not as guttural, not as low, less growl, less bite, less strength. They just definitely sound weaker on this album. And he started adding, you know, the... I just think that The Bleeding, once again, it's not a bad album, but it took things down a notch. By now, a silent animosity was growing inside the band, and it seemed that it was pretty much everyone against Chris Barnes. Apparently, no one in the band was really happy how he was dealing with his new evolution of his voice, and he was not budging in the way that he didn't want it to do the exact same thing as on the rest of the albums. That being said, he was already very uncomfortable in the band, and all of the other members were like, you know, butting heads with him, so their relationship was not healthy at all. So they decided to fire Chris, and it wasn't even like they fired him since he kind of already saw it coming.
Being kicked out of Cannibal Corpse was probably the best thing that ever happened to me in my career as a musician or a vocalist. I was so unhappy. Things had gotten so weird with like people clicking up within the band and stuff. And
so before they booted Chris out of the band, they were already working in the demo of what was going to be their next album, Created to Kill. So they basically had already maybe half of the album already written, and they needed to fill the void that Chris left in the band. So naturally, Cannibal Corpse went to Monstrosity and stole one of their members, this time their vocalist, a very young corpse grinder who until this point had become the band's frontman. So since they didn't want it to have anything to do with Chris Barnes, Created to Kill became Vile, featuring Corpse Grinder's debut album with Cannibal Corpse. And guess what? He fucking killed it. Now, interestingly enough, there's a bootleg of the Created to Kill, the album that was actually going to be recorded by Chris Barnes, and they basically ditched that and it became Vile. It's basically the same songs with different vocals. You can find that on YouTube, and I recommend that you go ahead and listen to that thing after you watch this video. Ironically, I think that Chris on that demo sounds amazing. It's somehow similar to what he was going to be doing on Haunted, on his debut album with 6 Feet Under. Nonetheless, it sounds pretty good. I think it even sounds much better than on The Bleeding. Once again, I encourage you to go ahead and listen to that demo because I think it's very interesting. I mean, listen to Vile and then listen to this demo. I'm not going to say that one is better than the other because, you know, it's obviously the debate of the last 30 years, Corpse Grinder versus Chris Barnes. They're different on their own, but I really like that demo. Listen them back to back and I don't know. So that being said, obviously I need to address the pink elephant in the room. And it's a question that has death metal heads killing each other since 1996. It is Corpse Grinder versus Chris Barnes. And the answer is that stop it. Get some help. And I think that both of them have their own unique style. I wouldn't say that I like one better than the other. It's just a matter of taste. And I think that a more concise answer is that there wouldn't have been a Cannibal Corpse without Chris Barnes, and there is no Cannibal Corpse without George Fisher. So that's my take on it. Now, drama aside, Vile. Man, Cannibal Corpse is the death metal gift that keeps on giving. George vocals are a very welcome change, not to throw shade at Chris Barnes. That raw and control energy is back, yet tighter, faster, and more technical. I mean, just relentless beating. Me dead. What an absolutely neck destroyer of a song, and the name couldn't be more spot on. And finally, I think that the production also peaked in this album. Everything is just there, just in a more compact, cleaner, and maybe drier presentation. And I also think that this album, production-wise, is like the Cannibal Corpse blueprint for future releases. And it's really amazing like how such a simplistic approach creates something that sounds so massive. And like it or not, this album is definitely a step forward from The Bleeding. So, 2 years after what I think is one of the best albums Cannibal Corpse has ever recorded, boom, Gallery of Suicide hits the shelves. Now, this album also comes with a surprise on its own. Apparently, the band was having some issues with Rob Barrett, one of the guitar players, as he was basically trying to push the band into a more trashy sound when the rest of the members were like, nope, we are death metal, period. out goes Rob, and hello to a guy who a year earlier was playing with Nevermore. Needless to say, he also played with Monstrosity. Production-wise, I think that this album has kind of that dry sound that reminds me a bit of Butchered at Birth. And by now, the band is already stepping fully into that zone of what we already recognize as Cannibal Corpse modern era sound. Now, while revisiting all of these albums to create this video, I noticed quite a bit of a pattern. Every time the band gets a new guitar player, the first album with that new member doesn't quite surpass the latest release. They often go to a more catchy, safe zone, so to speak. But then, boom, its second album completely crushes it. That's pretty much what happened from The Bleeding to Bile, and then from Gallery of Suicide to Bloodthrist. Don't get me wrong, I don't think that this is a bad album at all, not even like a, oh yeah, it's a solid album or something like that, but I think it lacks that how do we make this faster, more brutal and more technical kind of mindset that we are used to at this point. Throughout Gallery of Suicide, you can hear something like the band is trying to work with and fully adapt with the new blood. And actually, I think it's quite a cool thing because Cannibal Corpse is one of the few bands out there who let new members bring stuff to the table. Instead of, just saying, hey, you're the hired gun, play the parts and shut up. So yeah, in my humble opinion, I think that Gallery of Suicide is a bit weaker when compared to its predecessor. There's just a few songs that are not as memorable. They kind of feel like fillers, yet remember what I said about the second album effect? You're in for a treat. 1999, just 1 year after Gallery of Suicide, the band hits more sound with the classic "I'm sorry, it's kind of over, it's not you, it's me," and they will never step a foot again into those legendary studios. And I think it was a great call, and remember what I said about the second album effect? The brutal, technical, malignant, catchy, unapologetic Cannibal Corpse is back! I really don't know if it was like maybe Pat locking in fully with the band, or maybe the studio change or something like that, but damn, is this album good. And I kid you not, I don't think there's one single song in this album that it's like, okay, it's kind of bland, maybe a filler. Zero. It's banger after banger. To the point where I'd be totally fine with Cannibal Corpse playing this thing front to back live without any of the other classics. And actually this thing next year turns 27. Wouldn't it be cool to have like a mini 27th anniversary tour? European tour? Just saying? I mean, like, dude, this album should be banned. Well, technically it was, but honestly, it's illegal to have an album with... It's illegal to write riffs that good, man. Like, what the how are we supposed to top that? I mean, for all of the future generation of death metal musicians, like, we are always going to live under the shadow of Bloodthirst. It's not fair. We just have to be fine with hitting the shower and crying, just thinking about, I will never write something as good as Bloodthirst. Production-wise, this is peak death metal modern production. I mean, the guitars, that duo of the metal tone in front of the rectifier, God, sounds so brutal. And another thing to point here, and that I always loved about Cannibal Corpse, is the fact that they are able to easily transfer all of that massive energy that you get on the CDs to a live show. And that basically tells you that there's no editing trickery, there's no production trickery here. They are not adding like layers upon layers to make things sound like a huge whale, and then when the band plays live, it's like, whoa, what happened here? That doesn't happen with Cannibal Corpse. Not a lot of death metal bands out there can actually do that. And the ones that I actually like vouch for, guess what? They are all old school death metal. Obituary, Morbid Angel, Cannibal Corpse, Suffocation. Seeing any of those bands live is honestly a experience. Now, a little cute story about this album. By the time the album got out, it was actually the very first time that I ever listened to a Cannibal Corpse song. The song being Hatchet to the Head. So picture this, 13 or maybe 14 years old me, thinking that Slipknot's Iowa was the heaviest thing I've ever heard in my entire life. And then I go to a friend's house and he shows me this band and he plays Hatchet to the Head. I mean, I was like, what the fuck? My brain melted and I immediately got obsessed with all of the bloody, gory stuff they were singing about. And I remember me and my friends were like, dude, this guy's must really like, you know, corpses and people and shit like that, otherwise they would be posers. Another cute memory of this album is the first time that I ever saw Cannibal Corpse live. I was on the first line, and then George came to, you know, to introduce Beat of Zombies. And he went like, this song is about a bunch of zombies killing each other, or some shit like that. And I was like, fucking Beat of Zombies! And he was like, that's right! He pointed at me, and I immediately peed and shit my pants. But hey, enough nostalgia. 2002, Gore Obssessed. Same lineup, same studio, different producer. They started working with Neil Kernan, who was also going to produce their next album, The Wretched Spawn. And in my humble opinion, I think that this guy was one of the few who was actually able to capture, in a very, very good, honest way, the very brutal soul of Cannibal Corpse. Musically and production-wise, this album follows the same trail as Bloodthrist. The guitars are huge, crushing, heavy, and evil as fuck. And to be honest, topping Bloodthrist was going to be an almost near impossible task. So this is why I would call this album Bloodthrist, catchier, older brother. I think that my opinion on this album is going to be quite biased, but honestly, this is one of my personal favorites. And it's kind of funny because another pattern is that every time you get an album that it's sort of lazy or maybe not as good as its predecessor, it's almost like if the band realizes that and boom, said and done. The next release is going to be an absolute monster. And this is exactly what happened with The Wretched Spawn. I mean, just the opener of this album, Severed Head Stunning. Like, dude, George, how in the are you able to sing that fast? I think that that song is like some sort of statement or a beware, this thing is going to absolutely crush your neck. This album leaned incredibly hard on the technical and fast side of things. One cool thing to mention about this album is that it kind of feels like the old school Cannibal Corpse in the way that everything feels like a huge orgy of fast-paced, almost controlled, chaotic riffing. I mean, this album just gets you hooked from the opener to the very end. You can also feel like a bit of like maturity in this album in the way that it feels as if everything was thought very carefully. I mean, the album has like an aura of its own. The song flow is perfect. Everything like follows a rhythm of some sort. Yeah, I mean, like it feels that everything was very carefully planned in a very good way. I mean, lines or riffs in this album are just mean, malevolent, crazy, chaotic, from the absolutely impossible frantic disinvolvement to the haunting and creepy nothing left to mutilate to the ballad. I mean, this album just screams maturity, evolution, attention to detail. The guitars are just absolutely insane. Alex Webster's bass lines are like out of this world. George sings like a Gatling gun. And once again, they very intentionally raise the bar. This is why this thing is one of my favorite albums. It has everything Cannibal Corpse, but on steroids. 2006, Kill is released. Kill marks the end of the modern era Cannibal Corpse OG lineup. Founding member Jack Owen leaves the band in good terms. Just seemed that he wasn't very much into death metal anymore. He wasn't bringing new or interesting stuff to the table. Funny enough, that same year he joins Deicide and teams up with Ralph Santola to create one of Deicide's best albums, in my humble opinion, which is The Stench of Redemption. So in order to keep things tight and, you know, in the family, so to speak, Cannibal Corpse grabs once again Rob Barrett in order for him to fill the void that Jack Owen left. And remember, he already played and wrote stuff for Cannibal on Vile and The Bleeding. No more Sonic Ranch in Texas. The band went ahead and recorded Kill on Eddie Gruten's Mana Studio. This kind of kicks off a new era in Cannibal Corpse, and I will call it Cannibal Corpse Modern Era 2.0. I was gonna call it Cannibal Eternal Era, but that would be just mean. With the return of Rob Barrett and a fresh studio approach, Kill will naturally sound significantly different from its predecessor, The Wretched Spawn. Instead of the more exploratory, chaotic, technical thing that we had on The Wretched Spawn, Kill offers something more of a straightforward, fast-paced, heavy death metal. Composition and music-wise, the album feels more, I wouldn't call it a safe bet. I just think that it's not as catchy. There's not quite a lot of memorable songs there. Cool songs in this album: Time to Kill Is Now, Necrosadistic Warning. To be honest, the album feels a bit repetitive. I think that a lot of the songs in there share the same tempo, and that doesn't help with the repetitiveness of it all. So yeah, not the most memorable Cannibal Corpse album. But hey, one thing that I love about Cannibal Corpse is that even if they don't drop like a massive great hit or record or whatever, they will always deliver solid death metal. Kill might not be groundbreaking, but it's still a damn good slab of death metal. Three years of difference, same lineup, Evisceration Plague. It kinda follows the same rail as Kill, yet I will call this a step up from Kill. The songs just have more of that Cannibal Corpse sauce, if you know what I mean. Songs are not as repetitive, there are more tempo changes, songs are like different from each other. It's not like a line of bah, 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 same tempo, same songs, same riffing. So there's like more air. I think once again is a step up from Kill. Yet at the same time, it feels like too squared and straightforward. Songs are heavy and man, they hit hard. But composition-wise, once again, when I compare to other releases, they come a bit bland. They really don't capture that uneasy and twisted aura that Cannibal Corpse is known for. It's like, man, the recipe is solid, but we're missing some spices here and there. The one track that I feel that it's pure Cannibal Corpse with every sense of the word is the title track, Evisceration Plague. Composition-wise, it feels like the thing could have come off perfectly from Gallery of Suicide. It's catchy, crushing, and slow at the same time, and it drips evil. You know, it's Cannibal Corpse. The rest of the songs, they will definitely make your head bang, yet they will not stick on your memory the same way. Okay, Torture. I hear you. The secret Cannibal Corpse sauce is back, baby. The song starts with the super energetic, demented aggression, and that thing will set the tone for the entire album. Torture brings back that much needed chaos and dissonance, and it moves Cannibal Corpse far from the chuck fest that was Evisceration Plague and Kill. The production is slightly different. It's a bit loose in a good way, and I think that helps with the chaotic feel of it all, and that actually is a very positive thing. You know, songs are played with those oh shit moments. The riffs are great and memorable as fuck. And every single song has that perfect turn and twist. You know, the typical beat changes and that main aura, it's there again. Yet, at the same time, you can also hear that the sound, the composition, once again, it's evolving, it's changing, it's morphing. Just when I was starting to lose hope and thinking that maybe the band was leaning more towards a direction that I was not very in love with, boom, Torture to the rescue. Hope is rekindled with this one. This album is plagued with memorable songs. As I mentioned, the opener, Demented Aggression, is a great song. Then you have songs like Scourge of Iron, which is the kind of the typical Cannibal Corpse ballad with crushing slow tempo and those really heavy chugs. Encasing Concrete is the typical chaotic speed frenzy song. As Deep as the Knife Will Go is, man, it's such a banger. The chorus is just so catchy and delicious. Intestinal Crank is also a chaotic speed frenzy techie song. All in all, it's a great album that gives back that techie, groovy, technical, mean Cannibal Corpse we all love and adore. Yeah, Skeletal Domain. I don't know if it is because they changed studios or what, but this release, it's an oddball. It's like an experimentation kind of thing. It doesn't really follow Torture, or it's just like a thing of its own. It's almost like if they were trying different things, different techniques. It just shows another side of Cannibal Corpse, once again, of them trying to evolve, trying to change. And you can definitely tell that they are trying different things in this one. For example, Paul starts using like the typical blast beats instead of the hammer blast that he is so known for. And on some songs, for example, if no one tells you that this is Cannibal Corpse, and this is the first time that you ever listen to this song, it's going to take you a while to say, oh, okay, that's Cannibal Corpse. For example, Sadistic Embodiment, it's a thrash metal song. Then we have the title track, which it has this like groovy thing on the drums that basically reminds you of Lamb of God. Then Headlong into Carnage, it's basically almost like a continuation of that same song of Skeletal Domain. And then you have the Murderous Pact, which also has like that, I don't know how to say, like that groove, which basically locks in the bass drums and the palm mutes with the guitars. It also gives you that vibe of like Lamb of God. And the funny thing is that it's not a bad album, it just feels different. You can tell that they were trying to go maybe to something more groovy, more catchier, more, I don't know, to catch easy listening audiences. I don't know. Overall, a Skeletal Domain, it's a thing of its own. It's like has its own place, its own room, I guess. It's full with trashy riffs and hooky, groovy things here and there. Technically, I would only bitch about the guitars. They sound like really thin, and also the bass was EQ'd very weirdly, almost like if it was played using a pick. Still, a Skeletal Domain is a very interesting listen, and it's worth checking out. Yet, I don't think that any of those tracks deserves a spot on the Cannibal Corpse Classics list. So yeah, I think that right after the Wild, a Skeletal Domain, they were like, yeah, let's not do that again, ever. And back they went with Mr. Rutan to record their following album, Red Before Black. I mean, if you liked a Skeletal Domain, more power to you, yet thinking that they might have continued down that path, yeah, a bit scary. So just hearing the opener for this album, it's basically a statement of, we're f***ing back, forget about that, water under the bridge. The album has this Kill feel to it, in the way that the songs are very straightforward, fast-paced, but in a good way. It's like Kill 3.0. And it's really funny because all of the albums done by Eric, they kind of sound very similar, like production-wise. The album, it's not a bad album at all. It's a solid release. It's Cannibal Corpse. Yet, once again, and I'm going to repeat myself here once more by saying that it's missing that Cannibal Corpse secret sauce. Songs are cool, yet you don't have a lot of memorable songs in it. Once again, I don't think that any of these songs deserve a spot on the Cannibal Corpse Classics. It's more of the fast-paced, death, trashy, song type of album. Solid release, nonetheless.
One of the most popular death metal guitarists in the country is locked up in Hillsborough County. Pat O'Brien from the band Cannibal Corpse is accused of busting into a family's Northdale home while ammunition exploded inside his own house during a fire. News Channel 8's Corey Davis reports from court this morning.
Yeah, that happened. So in this one, we're going to have the first lineup change in the past 15 years. I'm not going to dwell into what happened or what might have happened. I'm just going to say that it sucks. I do believe that Pat was a very important part of that Cannibal Corpse secret sauce, and man, it's not going to be the same without him. On the bright side, you know, it's been a while since that happened, and currently he's playing with Ex-Hoarder. There's some videos of him playing live with them, and there's a statement saying that he's now, I think, that a solid part of the band. Yet knowing that, it's impossible for me not to think like, how about, you know, maybe, you know, I don't know, maybe bringing the guy back? But yeah, it's a bit of a stretch because basically he has all of his things going on, and I don't think it's even because of the bad rep or press that he might give to the band or whatever. It's more of the practical side of things because he currently can't leave the country. And you know, having Cannibal Corpse, that is a band that goes overseas almost every single year, that is going to be something to deal with, and I don't think it's practical for them. So, in a perfect world, one would think that maybe when his probation is completely over and he's entirely out of the woods, who knows. But anyways, violence unimagined. We have Mr. Rutan to fill the void that Pat left, and it makes perfect sense. He's a close friend of the band. By then, he had already produced, 4 Cannibal Corpse records. So yeah, they really like to keep it close and personal, and once again it makes perfect sense not to bring a complete stranger into the Cannibal Corpse situation because, you know, the beast might not like the new blood. Who knows? But yeah, Violence Unimagined, it sits on the very same trail as Kill, Evisceration, Plague, Red Before Black, the same fast-paced chalk fest that we are already familiar with. Okay, so I'm not going to say that it's Kill 4.0. It's different. We have new blood in the band, and remember what I said about Cannibal Corpse letting the new members, you know, bring their stuff to the table. Well, the same thing happened here. Mr. Eric Rutan, I think he contributed with a few songs on this album. Not exactly sure which those are. That being said, at times this album feels like Cannibal Corpse and Hate Eternal under a tree started to fuck each other viciously. God, I need to fucking work on my metaphors. I mean, it's not a bad thing, but god damn it, I'm getting old. I want another Bloodthrist. Even another Torture. I mean, like. So yeah. Fresh sound, new riffs, new member. I think that the only thing that set this thing apart from Evisceration, Plague is that it actually has some memorable songs here and there. Necrogenic Resurrection, Inhuman Harvest, Ritual Annihilation. So yeah, another solid release. Second release with the new lineup, and the thing kicks off with Overlords of Violence. It feels very familiar. Same old fast-paced chalk fest. Same style they lean into since Kill. But with a twist, the songs are more traditional, like in the writing process, structure-wise. Ironically, given the album's name, the Cannibal Corpse chaotic energy, it's nowhere to be found. The songs feel more straightforward and predictable than ever. And yeah, you can definitely hear Eric's fingerprints all over this album. Some of the solos are surprisingly melodic. I mean, those solos on their own, they're actually pretty cool, but inside the Cannibal Corpse context, they are completely out of place in a way. A good example is a solo on Summon for Sacrifice. You be the judge and put it down in the comments. To be honest, this has been one of those albums that I had the hardest time digesting, and I hate saying this about a band that I actually love. But honestly, it feels like a spent formula filled with elements that just don't belong. For example, take the main riff of Vengeful Invasion. It comes off lazy, almost melodic, weird for Cannibal Corpse. I don't know, man, it just doesn't fit. And the title track, Chaos Horrific, it's like this trash power chord-ish song with weird, and in a bad way, tempo changes. It's not like the unexpected twists and turns that, you know, we have on the good albums. This is just weird. It's not even interesting. It just feels off. It's almost as if they missed a beat or something. For me, this is the weakest Cannibal Corpse record so far. Maybe I need to let that thing grow on me. Maybe I need to listen to that album a few more times, but I don't know. And that's the funny thing, because if this album came from a different band, I think it would be different. I think I would have maybe rated on a higher scale or something like that. But it's Cannibal Corpse. Context is everything. I think that the only songs that truly carry that Cannibal Corpse spirit are Bloodblind and perhaps Pitchfork Impalement. On that same note, I really like also Drain You Empty, but that song, it just doesn't sound like Cannibal Corpse. No, across the board, the songs just lack that dissonant, sinister vibe. They're too neat, too polished, too structured in a boring way. So yeah, honestly, Chaos Horrific sounds, I'm just gonna say it, it sounds like the failed marriage of two bands. On paper, it sounds amazing. The reality is far from... it's yeah, kind of a mess.
This is what's called a skull full of maggots!
Over the years, we've had so many death metal bands, and many of the classics are still touring and releasing new music today. And many of these bands have been very successful and influential in their own way. But I really wanted to focus on Cannibal Corpse because beyond the notoriety and the fame and the cliche of wearing a Cannibal Corpse t-shirt, these guys have stood their ground like no one else. They've not only carried the death metal flag, but actually they push it higher than almost everyone. For the past 35 years, they've delivered consistent, crushing death metal one release after the other. And they've done it by pushing things a little further while still remaining true to their own roots. And honestly, hands down, these guys are one of the hardest working death metal bands or metal bands out there. And live, man, these guys are worth every single penny. Every chance I get, I'm there. The force, intensity, the brutality, the energy, it's all there. Cannibal Corpse are absolute pros in every sense of the word. They've adapted to changes in music and technology while remaining true to their own convictions. Cannibal Corpse is just one of those unstoppable bands, a relentless, unstoppable death metal machine that still hits just as hard live as they did on the mid-90s. And I think that none other band has taken death metal so seriously as these guys, and that's why I have nothing but absolute love and respect for them. Thank you so much for taking the time and watching this video. Man, this was a lot of fun. It was super interesting to revisit Cannibal Corpse catalog from beginning to end, back to back, hearing the changes in between discs, the context. It was absolute fun. So let me know what you thought of this down in the comments. Maybe there's another classic out there that you would like me to go through all of this. Obviously I did this by heart because this is a band that I love and adore. There's many other classics that I also love and adore, and I obviously have listened to the catalog back to back. Maybe I'll continue doing these things. I just did this out of respect and inspiration, I guess. Also, another thing I've noticed that many of you watch these videos but you haven't subscribed to the channel. So this is going to be the perfect time for you to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, leave me a lovely comment down below. And also worth mentioning, I created a Bandcamp specifically for the songs that I've been releasing for that series of videos, for the recreating old school death metal. Also know that there's a great way for you to be able to contribute to this channel if you feel like, and that is by buying me a beer. I'm going to leave down below a link to my Buy Me a Coffee profile. Also, I'm going to leave down below the same link that I mentioned about the Bandcamp. This way, if you feel like contributing to the channel, you can buy one of the songs there. And thank you so much for watching this video and your support. See you on the next one.